illegal. Can I put it down? No way. There's no way I could put it. And it's a shame because I would innocently love to pull it down, but you can't. And so when you see things like the Sweeney, Life on Mars, you think, did that go on? Yeah. And worse, and worse. But that guy, Chopper Reed, he, in one of his interviews, that crazy Aussie gangster fella, he said that when you write your autobiography, never tell the truth, because like him, it got him an extra 5 years in prison because he grassed himself up. Yeah. So I've got to be careful I don't grass myself up, I don't grass other people up. And it's blatant, intentional, spiteful criminality, because that's not me, but the rules got bent, and they got bent in a way that it was illegal. And that's as far as I'm prepared to go on that one.
Yeah. No, well, obviously, with your mission being about sort of child abuse and wanting to kind of expose that, as it were, obviously the stuff we're going to unpack on this interview, your expertise, let's say, can probably give a full examination of it. So obviously the one that's trending, it'll probably be on the thumbnail and the title of this video, the whole Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Now, I know we spoke on it very briefly, but that was more about Prince Andrew last time.
Yeah.
Kind of just give an overview, John, of who Jeffrey Epstein was. Obviously, we'll touch on the files as the conversation progresses, but just where he was and how he became to be.
Yeah, I think if you take it back a bit further, because you've got Jeffrey Epstein, I think a New Yorker, ethnically Jewish. It looks like the guy's a bit of an underachiever. He then ends up getting a job that's far above his ability. He's and he ends up as a maths teacher at a posh school. And from there he ends up going to work for one of the big commercial sort of, trading companies. Is it Bear, something or other, in the stock market. And that's sort of where it sort of goes, off the chart for him. And then he teams up with Ghislaine Maxwell. But when you look at her, you see, this is something that I mentioned. I don't know whether I mentioned on it here or maybe on Sean Atwood's show or one of them, when the P. Diddy, Epstein stuff come out and went, listen, the British tail is what wags the American dog, right? What they're seeing over there, there's pop stars and that involved. Oh, come on. It's low-hanging fruit. Look at what we had. We had Dolphin Square and we had Elm Guest House. We had people at the heart of our establishment going in there and committing horrific sexual abuse and I don't know if we can say that word, serious sexual offending against young boys, right? We got people, one of the guy was a fellow called Nicholas Fairbairn, Lord Nicholas Fairbairn. He was an attendee of Elm Guest House, this bed and breakfast in southwest London, an opulent part of, middle England, the borders of Thames, in which it was a male brothel basically for young boys. And most came from the care homes, right? We're looking at algorithms, and I'm going to tie it in with the Epstein thing, And, Cyril Smith, Peter Morrison, good friends with Margaret Thatcher in the political realm. Cyril Smith, a very, very prominent cabinet minister. Nicholas Fairbairn was the advocate depute for Scotland. Advocate depute is the head of the justice system. So you got like the Home Secretary, and then you'll get their legal, like the Attorney General in the UK. In England, we've got the Attorney General, which is in charge of all the barristers and solicitors and all the serious case files, and everything really comes under him. He was that for the Procurator Fiscal in Scotland. So the CPS in Scotland is called the Procurator Fiscal, and the Attorney General out there is called the Advocate Depute. And Nicholas Fairbairn was in charge of that. Nicholas Fairbairn was linked in with a guy called Bob Henderson. Both of them were QCs. Bob Henderson's nickname was Dirty Bob, who was connected to child abuse, murder of rent boys. And Nicholas Fairbairn even raped Bob Henderson's daughter when she was very young. She's come forward and spoken out. But Scotland, like all of the UK, had terrible revelations of systemic and institutional child abuse in the care homes, the residential homes, these places of so-called benevolence that were set up by philanthropists and everything else, such as Dr. Bernardo, and Dr. Bernardo. This came out in the recent government inquiry, the findings of the IICSA, the government sanctioned, independent investigation. Dr. Bernardo was responsible for the trafficking of 40,000 children into domestic servitude and sexual slavery in what's termed the New World. He auctioned them. And then when you say Dr. Bernardo, people think, oh, what a fantastic guy. No, he wasn't. He was the biggest procurer and trader in children, and these children went out to places like Australia, out to the work institutes in Canada, where they were raped and tortured, and some of them died. In Canada, they suffered horrifically. They were selling. There was one case of a young kid. Dr. Bernardo sold a child at an auction. This kid was very, very young, went off to a farm where the guy running it, his wife had died, and he was totally illiterate and couldn't read or write, and basically kept the kid like a dog. And the kid starved to death and was found next to a dog, beaten and starved to death and whipped. Appalling what went on. There's a film called Sunshine and Oranges about the kids, they called them the Bindon Boys, that got sent out as young as 8 into hard graft, stonemasonry and foundation digging, 8-year-old kids in the Australian outback, to this home. I think it might have been the Bindon Monastery or something, but they're called the Bindon Boys, that's what they were termed. And the brothers there were raping these young boys. Wow. And of course, a lot of them went on to lives of alcoholism and violence, and then clogged up the prison system, and then suicide comes next. So when you look at what's coming out in America, we've had it. And what happened? The government comes in, they said, right, we're going to deal with this. We're going to make sure that, the public get justice, the victims get justice. And the first thing they do is they attack the victims, and they start imprisoning the victims for making false allegations. And they give them such heavy sentences, it sends a shockwave through the survivor community. Shut your mouth. Especially where there's establishment figures involved. Because this causes political influence and it causes political instability. Therefore, it comes to the attention of the intelligence services, and it's blackmail. It's all blackmail. And if you look at what is acceptable, what do people find acceptable? I'm putting together a talk about acceptable paedophilia, right? And there are some people, like Sidney Cook, very notorious, child murderer, child rapist, organised. And yeah, he looks like a rat. They call him Hissing Sid. He just looks like, if you were to draw what a PDF file looks like, it would be him. So we can hate him. But what about Elvis Presley? He was hanging around with Priscilla when she was 14. What does that make him? Jerry Lee Lewis. Look at Pete Townsend from The Who got a caution for put on the sex offenders register for his nefarious paedophilic activities. We accept them. Why do people look? Michael Jackson, why are people still listening to Michael Jackson records when what he was and what he represented was wrong? And we accept it because they are the human face of it, and we can make jokes about them. Oh, that's just quirkiness. Look at Bill Wyman hanging around with Mandy Smith from the Rolling Stones. He was hanging around with her from the age of 13. He was in his 50s. Oh, come on. But we make excuses for that, right? And same with politicians. This Nicholas Fairbairn, he was classed as an eccentric, right, because of his love of whiskey and the fact he would turn up a Prime Minister's Question Times in a kilt. And Thatcher said he was the most colourful and interesting front bencher, that they had, and he was a lord and everything else. He was having a clandestine secret affair with a woman called Esther Ranson, right? We all know who she is. And at the time she was setting up Childline. And let me tell you now, Childline, right? If you're in trouble and you need the police, you dial 9 9 and a 9. Why would you dial 0800 111 555? You know? Why would you dial that? You know, how many is that? What 10, 11 numbers? Dun, 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 dun. And you've got to remember that? A kid, 999, get it? When I worked on the child abuse investigations, we used to get referrals, and they would come through all different manner of channels, but mainly they come from social services or the schools, right? In all the time I worked there, dealt with one case out of the hundreds that came from Childline. They must have had thousands, maybe tens of thousands of referrals come to them from kids. Where were they? Where did they all go? Because they never ended up on our desk. And I worked in one of the biggest child abuse offices in the country. When the government launched an inquiry into these kids' homes, that Scotland was the last place to do it. It went on the longest in Scotland. And the Scottish have got a very different attitude towards child welfare. They've got a very benevolent attitude towards child welfare. And the Scottish were historically always against children's homes, even to so much as the Scottish prison system used to allow kids to stay with the parent in prison, whereas in the rest of the UK they wouldn't allow that. They got put in a home. And Scotland said, no, kids should be kept together. So there was a need to really split Scotland up if you were looking at it from conspiratorial eyes. And they set up these respite homes to take kids out of the industrial impoverished places like Glasgow and things like that, and give the parents a break. That was the thing. So he sent one up in Perth called Forneath, and it was for girls. So it was for girls in respite and maladjusted girls. And basically it was a child brothel. That's what it turned into. The women that were running it were classed as vicious. They would whip them, they would beat them, and they would pimp them out. Young girls from primary school age up until secondary school age. And when the inquiry came around and the police did get involved, right, they took 20 girls and they were interviewed and they were shown pictures. Out of the 20, I think, I might get this wrong, but it's either 13 or 16. I'd have to look at my notes, but anyway, it's academic, it's semantical, that really. 13 or 16, so the majority of them picked one person out as their abuser, their rapist, and it was Nicholas Fairbairn. The head of the justice system from Scotland was actively going out there and selecting girls out of kids' homes so he and his cohorts in the legal system could rape these kids. And it got termed the magic circle, because these were men in the legal profession that were raping kids with impunity, and they called it a magic circle because any allegations just disappeared. And one detective from Edinburgh, he did investigate it, and he had the same as me, told to shut your mouth and move on, right? Because it could have destroyed, the fabric of society. So people would, even like Margaret Thatcher seeing him as quirky and all that. No, he wasn't. He was a very dangerous predatory rapist. But when we look at him, Nicholas Fairbairn, come from aristocracy, his mother abandoned him at birth. His father didn't want to know. His father was a drunk anyway. He was placed into a school called Lorette, and it was a bit like Eton for Scotland. And when they did the inquiry, went out there and investigated these schools, they went to the impoverished schools and then to these wealthy fee-paying schools. And this is something I want to discuss about criminality, and it ties in with our topic, right? And they found this Lorette College, the abuse was so appalling. And examples of it was that there was a bed frame, a metal bed frame that they would put electricity on and tie the kids to it and electrocute them. There was a pit that they would dig a hole, put the kids in there, and the masters would urinate on them. I mean, what does that do to a little kid? Plus the fact of the standard buggery and whippings and beatings, and then being put in a pit and urinated on, and then tied down, especially if your mother's abandoned you and you've got rejection, abandonment issues, well, it's just bred a monster. So this is what happens. You're breeding monsters, and with criminality, so we take this area here, right? We take Liverpool, and one of the most feared gangsters that come out of here is Stephen French. And in his testimony, I don't want to talk for him, but he was in Walton Road Child Assessment Centre, and he went in as a kid nicknamed Smiler. Within years of coming out of that home where there was just non-stop abuse on some of these kids, he went on to become someone called the Devil. And they made him. And he openly says that. They made the Devil. They took Smiler and turned him into the Devil. You know, of course, his crimes were ones of violence, you know, and you've got the poverty and the racism and all that went with it. But when you've got people that have come from the privileged classes, the upper and the ruling classes, you know, they suffer as well. And I was approached by a guy, his father was a very well-known lord in England. And his father's got this museum, and it's one of his work in heritage museums. Is very, very famous guy. And his son has written a book, and it's all about the abuse. And his father was abusing him sexually, was raping him. And he said, not only was my father doing it, his father was a prominent politician as well. He said 9 members of Winston Churchill's cabinet were doing it to me as well. And he got sent off to the elite school called Eton, which has produced, I think, 11 prime ministers have come out of Eton. And they have a thing called the fagging system, where the older boys are given permission for the guidance and the discipline of the younger boys. And basically they get them to do all their little chores, but they cane them and they sexually assault them. And then that gets passed on because shit rolls downhill. So they've been bitten, they go on to bite. So when they're older, they do the same. So you're talking about young men whose first sexual experience is an older boy, whatever doing to him, masturbating them or raping them, whatever. No one's going to say anything because everyone's doing it. So it starts twisting you of what it's like and caning them. And when I was a detective on the Vice Unit, we used to raid brothels. We raided an upmarket. We raided them all from the bottom end crack house ones right up to the upmarket Mayfair ones in central London. We raided one in Mayfair, and when we went in, there was this guy, and I can only describe him as a bit like John Cleese, and you know, very, very posh. And he's got the suspenders for his socks. He's got his suit on, his trousers down, and he's being caned by a prostitute. And he said in the most plumiest accent when we kicked the door in, he said, "My God, officers, am I in trouble?" And he got told, "Put your trousers on and F off," you know, and he's running out trying to pull his trousers up. But he paid to be caned. And when I started doing a lot of work with profilers, I said to a profile, "What is it with the poshes and being caned and that?" And he said, it was a woman actually, she said to me, "Well, what it is that at that point in their life, they have no control. No control. So it could be caned or being buggered or whatever it might be. But they reenact it, and now they're in control. So, and it reminds them of their childhood. So many emotional and historic connections to it. They're reinventing that brokenness. But when someone's abused, their emotional clock stops. So you can get someone, a child, if you was into abusing kids. And what happens is we're made up of 3 parts. You've got your physical self, you've got your intellectual self, and you've got your emotional self, right? So imagine it like a snowman with 3 balls, the intellectual, the emotional, and then the physical. So you abuse a child, what's it going to do to that mind? It's going to crush their mind. But the mind's good, the mind's strong, the mind's clever, the mind is phenomenal, to be honest. Can they get over it? Yeah. Can they go on to achieve? Yes. In fact, they can go on to overachieve, because you'll get this mindset, this stoic attitude that no one will ever bully me again. You know, I'm going to show the world who I am. I'm not nothing. I'm not rubbish. I am going to prove myself, because there's a need to prove yourself. And they can go on to do very well, right? There's no evidence to say that they don't. Physically, can someone who's been abused go on to do well? Yeah. No one will hurt me like I've been hurt. There's nothing you lot can do to me that hasn't been done to me, right? If you watch, the BBC did a fantastic 2-parter on the Falklands War. It might have been Channel 4, about the Falklands War, because it's like 50 years on from the Falklands War. And they interview the parachute regiment, 2 Para, who bore the brunt of this hand-to-hand fighting. And the ones who really got affected by it came from normal homes. The ones that were like, well, who didn't sink into depression, they all came from child abuse. They all come from sexual abuse. And they all went on to join the SAS. And they interviewed 5 SAS soldiers. 3 of them were sexually abused in the care homes as kids. Right, and you'll see that with elite combatants, boxers, MMA and all that. You'll get a lot of people that have come from troubled backgrounds going into that, because no one's ever going to hurt me. They're still fight. And if you look at the testimony of that guy, Lenny McLean, the bare knuckle fighter, he saw everyone as his stepdad abusing him. And when I look at him, I know a guy very similar to him, and I think the abuse was probably a lot more severe and personal than he makes out, because of the hatred. And I knew someone very similar. But it will kill you. So you can go on to overachieve massively if you've been abused. But the one thing you can't do if you don't get the right help, and that is your emotional self. That child, the clock, the emotional maturity and the growing stops that day. So the younger someone's abused, the more emotionally effed up they are. And if you look at like a child soldier, they're used because they're callous, ruthless. I mean, kids do horrible things. Kids will pull legs off frogs and insects and all that. They do spiteful things, and there's a selfishness in children as well, because that's natural. You've got to be naturally narcissistic, and that's why as adults we have to teach kids to share and learn, because if we don't boundary a kid, they become narcissistic. So you screw a kid up by giving them no love or too much love. So these new sort of wokey parents who don't agree with boundaries and that, they're screwing their kids up. They're setting themselves up for a life of emotional damage, really. So that's our job, is to do that. So, but when someone's been emotionally damaged, you see it in adult life, because me and you can sit here and we can get to points of variance. We can differ in our opinion, and we can talk about it, discuss and agree to disagree. Someone who's come from abuse can't do that. It's like road rage. They'll go from someone cutting them up to jumping out the car and smashing their face in, because that's the emotional damaged self. And you see that in people. And especially in my job that I was doing, interviewing victims and survivors and sex offenders, you saw it in them. And it was my job to aggravate that broken child and get them to talk. And there was many ways you could do it. But you look at someone's value system, what they treat and everything else, and that's how you sort of do it. So the reason I'm saying this is that when you're dealing with crime, the majority of crime, especially in an area such as Liverpool back in the day, it would have just been the working and low classes just causing crimes of just disorder and dishonesty, thieving and beating each other up. Do the posh people do it? No, not really, It's not their thing. Do the low and working classes do it? Yeah, of course they do. And there'll be certain areas that are worse, and in them areas it'll be a certain family. 3 or 4 families that cause chaos for everyone because they're totally screwed up. So we can pigeonhole crime. But that's why they don't heavily police or prioritise sex crime, because you can't pigeonhole it. Because in a society now that's all about equality, not equity, and diversity and wokeness, well, paedophilia and Satanism comes to that, are way ahead of that. Way ahead of that. They've been the most diverse, all-inclusive category ever. They're not heterosexual. They're not homosexual. They're not bisexual. They're what they jokingly term trisexual. They will try anything. They don't really have a genre. They have a liking, but then boundaries are easily broken down. And that's the emotionally damaged self in there. And it's across every strata of society. It's through every caste system. It's through every nationality, every religious group. Someone said to me once, they're Romanian, they went, in Romania, we don't have paedophiles. And I just laughed. I said, what a load of nonsense. Absolute load of nonsense. Someone else said, you don't get many black paedophiles. Again, a load of nonsense. There are as many or the percentage of paedophiles in the black community is the same in the Jewish community, and the same in the white community, the ginger community, whatever it is, it's the same. It's the same percentage, and because it's the damaged self, so it doesn't know any economic boundaries. And therein lies its secret and its power, because it's a weakness and it's a yearning, and it's something people will walk over hot coals to do. And the world of espionage knows this, and it knows its value, and it knows that it can be coercive. So years ago, in say, take British politics, if an MP was gay, for example, right, I'll go back a bit further. In the days of a chivalrous society, if a member of Parliament was having an extramarital affair, pressure could be lent on that person to toe the line, otherwise they'll be exposed for being a cheat and an all-round cad, and not gentlemanly behaviour, and it'd be disruptive, destructive in British society to be cheating and having an affair. But then them days went, and then, up until not so long ago, it was illegal to be homosexual in the military. Especially when I was growing up, that was part of the vetting process. If anyone wanted to join the army, and that they would filter them out if they were gay, because it had black male value, you see, and they knew it. I got a job offered to me, and I had to go through very, very high level vetting, very intrusive vetting, the highest level you get. We're talking the intelligence services level, because I got offered a job to deal with top secret information and the gathering of it, because I was used by the Metropolitan Police, because I've got this ability to communicate, and people would tell me stuff that they decided to utilise my skills and send me off into the prison system and everywhere else in organised crime, and get information and convert people into an informant, offer people deals. This sort of makes me a bit qualified to talk about the topic we're on about. And I spent a long time in the prison system and getting caught up. At the time, it was majority around the Turkish mafia, and getting those in trouble, out of trouble, and offering them deals. But they had to come up with the goods. They could be looking at 30 years in prison. One case, a guy was looking at 15 years in prison for importation of heroin, and I ended up in quite an infamous Scottish prison. I went to meet with a guy, and we broke a deal. He got 2 years. 2 years. That's the power of it, But he was now in my pocket, And the one thing is, the tail can't wag the dog. When you deal with informants, and this is the key to this, is informants. Right, you are always in charge. As a handler, the moment they push that envelope, they're gone. They are sacked. They are gone. Right, they have to adhere to the rules. You don't. They do. Right, so it's got huge value. Right, and it gets used. So, like gays, years ago, you could blackmail gay people. Well, we've seen you in this club. We've seen you there. You're gonna play the game. I mean, they tried to do it with George Michael, and Sony said the world can't know you're gay because too many young girls follow you, and that's the majority of our sales is young teenage girls. And if they find out you're gay, that's it. We're screwed. So they tried to blackmail him. And what did George Michael do? He went and made that song Come Outside. And he actually held him to task. And, power to George Michael for doing it. And, he turned around and said, there's no way you're blackmailing me. I'm gay. You all know I'm gay. You made a fortune out of me because I'm in this industry, because I'm gay, and blah, blah, blah. No way am I betraying it, And what could they do? There's not much they could do. In the, ultimately, the whole thing just, backfired on him, and he had a premature death. But he stood up for what he was, and he really did take on the beast, that guy. So I think he was very brave in doing it. But now, of course, so what? In fact, the opposite now. You get praised if you have a sexual proclivity the other way than if you are what's called straight and normal, And then cocaine, we know you're doing cocaine, and you can bribe someone. This secret out, but now, so what? So if you're gay, you're cheating on women, you're doing drugs, so what? What does it matter? But the one last bastion of decency is you don't touch kids. You don't touch kids, right? As much as the Labour government has tried to normalise paedophilia, and it has by having annexing a lobbyist group called PI, Paedophile Information Exchange, which was a pro-paedophile lobbyist group that let's say annexed themselves to the Labour Party, was patronised by Margaret Hodge, Patricia Hewitt and Harriet Harman. All three of them long-serving female members of Parliament, left-wingers. All three of them became like right honourables. They became right honourables. So they got basically anointed by the Queen, you know, in their parliamentary careers. So they're classed as honourable people, and they're not. And one, because you know, they were behind this group that wanted the age of consent between a man and a boy to be 4 years old. Harriet Harman pushed for the age of consent between women and grown-up men to be 14. I mean, what a despicable woman. One of them, I think it was Hodge, Tony Blair made a minister for children. So when we're looking at the heart of the establishment, we're looking at America with the Trump administration. Look, we've had it here. We had a member of parliament called Jeffrey Dickens who had files of politicians involved in abusing kids. Right, he handed it to the Home Secretary, to Leon Britton, and it went missing. Later on, Tom Watson, the MP, did the same. He handed a file of politicians involved in the abuse of children to Leon Britton. Again, it went missing. Leon Britton, the fastest ever promoted Home Secretary, right? But powerfully connected, you know, to strong Jewish lobbyist groups. And I don't want to go down that line, you know, but that's the fact. And again, he was protected. It was only posthumously that it came out that numerous allegations had been made against him. And I'd even heard it from police officers from the Central Paedophile Unit that he'd been looked at, right? Allegations against boys, and the fact that he used to like to whip them and get them to dress up in women's underwear. And a woman approached me and she made women's underwear, and she told me that she'd been making pants, bras and knickers for him and a guy called Stephen Milligan, MP. And she said to me, I don't mind the Stephen guy because he's quite sweet, but the other one, she said, the Jewish guy's horrible. He's a real pig. Of course, it was him. And a file of photographs were called the Solenki tapes by Dover Customs seized. They said it was photos, but the rumours are it was videos of a naked young boy sat on the lap of Leon Britton whilst Leon Britton's wearing women's underwear. And I took it to the police and said, I know who made that. There's a good chance I can back this up. Never went anywhere. I gave the information to the Minister of Policing and Crime. He took it to Theresa May, and he backed me in what I was doing when I whistle blew. And 2 days later, he was removed from his post as a Cabinet Minister for Policing and Crime. You know, and this is Home Secretary. 117 files were handed to Theresa May of politicians and known prominent persons involved in child abuse. They went missing. So if we look at the algorithm of this, how is that any different to Donald Trump now saying, despite his claims, I will expose this at the highest level, and he turned around and he said that who was it that Bill Clinton's got to worry about the island stuff, referring to Epstein Island. He's got a lot to worry about, and I'm going to show his file. And now he's denying the file's existence. The man's an absolute liar, right? And people sit there and think he's a saviour. He ain't a saviour. There's only one saviour, right? You know, and that's a man that died on the cross. It ain't Donald Trump. Donald Trump is lying. He is lying. And he's lying because he's in deep. And because of what has gone on is no different to what went on in the United Kingdom. No different, right? It will bring down the establishment. But there's connections here, right? There's connections here to the intelligence agency. No more so Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, MI6 and the CIA. But if we look at MI6 was run by a guy called Sir Peter Heyman. Sir Peter Heyman had connections with PI, and Sir Peter Heyman got convicted of offences against children. He was head of MI6. You know, when the PI list came out There was a brigadier in the army. There was a head of a group called the Boys Brigade. One of the heads of that was named in it. There was one guy that was head of a charity to help families growing up in poverty. So if he's got access to the list of families growing up in poverty, he's got access then to people that are financially strapped, which therefore makes them vulnerable. And therefore, potentially, the children could be placed into respite care and hence back into the machine that will eat their souls, and abuse them. Because Dolphin Square, which was the parliamentary residence, it was the venue for a lot of young boys from care homes to be taken there to parties. I mean, this is highlighted by the testimonies of a man called Richard Kerr, who went on to 60 Minutes Australia and said he was taken from a kids' home in Belfast called Kincora, and he was taken to Dolphin Square and raped by politicians. There's a guy called Anthony Daly who ended up as a male prostitute on the streets of London around the meat rack, and he writes in his book, Playland, exactly what happened. Young boys being viciously abused, not just raped, but viciously attacked and assaulted. And there have been investigations into child murder in that block, the parliamentary residence. So a few years ago, because of my campaigning, I was stopped in the street by an old colleague of mine, and he worked with me in central London. And the area where we worked, it covered Dolphin Square in Westminster. And he said, John, I need to talk to you. I've been trying to get hold of you. And he said, at the time, the police station that covered it was called Rochester Row. And there was, because of the amount of dignitaries and people of prominence that lived there would be security patrols. So there'd be a minibus for the police that would drive around checking on these addresses, right? That there's nothing suspicious, because the IRA were very prominent, and their lives were at risk. And, they part of their package for employment is that they get this police protection. So these checks are done, these security checks are done. And a lot of them lived in Dolphin Square. But there were minicabs going in there early hours of the morning with young children in there from kids' homes, from South London and all sorts. And the security patrols kept stopping these cars. And the superintendent for Rochester Road dragged all the uniformed officers in and said no one is to stop any car going in or out of Dolphin Square. If they do, that's it, they're in big trouble. So he's basically threatened, well, where's his information come from? It's come from high up, because it could jeopardise the flow of young rent boys to feed, this demonic machine that is our parliament. I got given the name of two officers handed to me, and I took this to a parliamentary contact. I ended up having a meeting right in the heart with the Home Office, and I'd name of these two police officers, and they were the protection officers for Ted Heath. And Ted Heath, who was a prime minister who took England into Europe in the early 70s. And these officers, what they'd done was they were his protection, what called prot officers, they're protection officers. And late at night, taxis were coming in from children's homes, delivering young boys to his parliamentary residence at number 10. But back then you could drive right up to the gate, And these officers knew what was going on. They knew these boys were being raped. And they discussed between themselves, what do we do? If they tell anyone, it won't go anywhere. If they, take it any higher, they'll get moved. So they did the best thing they could have done. They confronted Ted Heath. So they went up to him and said, right, it stops. And he said, rightly so, one of them said it did stop for 2 weeks. He knew what we was on about. For 2 weeks, no boys delivered. And 2 weeks later, they were both pensioned off, right? And they had their names and they were willing to speak out. So this is what we're seeing happen. And of course, if you take it any further, pretty much finished. So that's a British establishment for you. So let's go on. So you say about Epstein. Let's take it a bit further. Epstein's got a girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a procurer. She's the main procurer, right? And I want to explain how the grooming process works, right? So you've got there's children there. You need someone to go and get them. And with girls, you can have like a Romeo. So you're going to need a young lad. And this is what you're seeing with the Pakistani gangs. They've sort of got it down to a T. But it goes on all over. This is my point of variance with a lot of the alt-right campaigners about the grooming gangs, because they're predominantly Kashmiri Pakistanis. I'm like, no. This has been going on far before them boys were on the block. You know, I've dealt with Albanian, Kosovan, Lithuanian, Jamaican, and women. And the first conviction ever of procuring children prostitution was a conviction that, you know, I jointly got with a colleague against a woman called Fiona Walsh, aka Foxy. So if we link her in with like Ghislaine, again, very larger than life, quite attractive character, prostitute, but she would go around these young girls that were a little bit screw loop, from care homes or, you know, vulnerable, whatever that might mean, but in need of a bit of comfort and a bit of compassion, a bit of love. And this Foxy would go in there and brush their hair for them, do their nails for them. And that was as simple as that. And then say, oh, come along, we're going to meet a guy. Then go and meet a Jamaican drug dealer, and they all found him funny, and they'd smoke a joint, you know. It all starts with a cannabis, you know. No one can ever tell me that stuff is totally harmless, you know. It has done more hooking people than anything that has, you know. It's a gateway for so much, but to get them on the cannabis, and then she'd then sit them down with a fella and they'll watch a porno, and then from there the guy would then do something with her and the girl would watch, and then they'd get another man in who'd be a punter, and the girl would sit and watch this Foxy with the punter, and then watch her get the money and say, well, why don't you have a guy? Go, you'll get more money because you're younger. And she'll be, I don't know, now go and have a go. And of course, that's what'll happen. I'll be with you. And the guy will pay £200 or whatever to shag this little girl, 11 years old. And then that's it. Well, look, half the money. You have half, I have half. And then the little girl does it. And then it's like, well, look, we'll go to this other place. And then she'll take us to a crack house. And then start passing around the boys in a crack house, but giving a bit of crack as well. And that's it. You know, that's it. Like the film, the song by the Stranglers, that Golden Brown, is you're on the ship and you're tied to the mast. Now she's on that ship and she's tied to the mast now. But what they do then is they say, do you want to earn a bit more money? You know, well, that little girl you hang around with, oh, so why don't she come along? Because her friend will be in trouble, her friend will be in a kid's home or whatever, and they get their friend along. It's the same algorithm. And this was in the council estates of central London, right? It was exactly the same what was doing in the opulence of Little St. James. Exactly the same. I know it because it's an algorithm. I know how these people work. And I know that these are broken people. And I now know the value. And I got threatened and warned because the girl that was running it, she was in with coppers. There were coppers involved with it. There was high up management coppers involved. There was a judge involved, right? And that's where the threat come on me. It's no different from anything else, right? Had I been dirty, they'd have bought my silence early doors. That's it. I ain't going any further, right? So what did they want from me? Probably wanted me to commit suicide. I don't know. Maybe these people do commit suicide. But dead men tell no tales, and it's as simple as that. So when we look at Ghislaine Maxwell, well, who is she? Who is she? She's the daughter of a Czech Ukrainian Ashkenazi Jew, which his name was Jan Ludwig Hock. A family of itinerant illiterates. There was 9 of them. They're just basically Jewish gypsies from very impoverished village in, you know, the old sort of Russian occupied part of that southeastern Europe, you know. They were despised, and so they had to make their money any way they could. And, you know, and it was basically, dad was a hawker, selling anything he could. And Robert Maxwell changed his names 4 times. He left when he could, made his way through Europe and become occupied, and he ended up fighting for the Allied forces. And after his 4th name change, come up with the name Robert Maxwell. You know, a broken man, but did very, very well. but started working for Israeli intelligence from a very early time. And they reckon he changed the narrative of science, because the Germans were very advanced in science, and because of what they did, they had no voice for many, many years. I know under Operation Paperclip, a lot of the American scientists did go out, Mengele, Hess and all these sort of lot, and the fellow who invented the V2 rocket and things like that did end up in America and Argentina and places like that. But apart from that, the others, they couldn't do anything. So he set up a publishing company which was funded by MI6 to get the information off the Germans, him being a Jew, get the information off the Germans and then put it into publications which were then manipulated and altered. So he actually altered the narrative of science for many years. And he did so well at it that's how he got into publishing. And he was just a deceptive liar. He was a storyteller and a nasty, nasty, horrible man, obsessed with power and money. And he was very abusive to his children, right? Now, he went on to have 9 kids like his father, but one of his kids ended up in a coma and then died after a car accident. And so the mother, Elizabeth, put all the effort into this dying son and forgot about Ghislaine. So she's now growing up, right, with abandonment and rejection issues. And her father was very abusive to her. So how is she any different to Lord Nicholas Fairbairn? Very, very similar. She then gets sent off to these elitist schools, boarding schools at a very young age. Well, what did that do to her? Probably the same as what it did to Nicholas Fairbairn. She's a very emotionally broken and spiteful women. And she was classed as an abuser. And when women abuse, so 90% of all sexual abuse goes unreported. 80% of it occurs within the home environment. 9 out of 10 abusers are men, but 1 in 10 is a woman. And when women abuse, it's done with a spitefulness 6 times out of a man. It's very callous, it's very cold, and also women have a need to be venerated, to be exalted. So it's like, we used to always call it, what do we call it? Women with rank in the police. Those high up senior officers that were women were always nasty bastards. Right, there's a need to one of the men senior officers might be say hello to him, but woman, hello ma'am, you'd have to respect their rank. They're very much into that, and they do that when they abuse. They have to be respected. They command respect. It's some of these very bizarre things that come out of it. Anyway, when we look at Ghislaine Maxwell, she was very much of that ilk. And she's got him with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, again, look at him. He's come from nothing. And he ends up in this Bear Sachs, stock trading company. Does incredibly well there, and off he goes in to earning billions all of a sudden over nothing. And he's caught up with all sorts of bizarre wrongdoing, and then ultimately he's caught 2006 for procuring young girls for prostitution. And he goes away for that of a 14-year-old girl, and the man's a paedophile. And of course, he's connected to our royal family. And there's connections with the Israeli intelligence service, like there is with Robert Maxwell. So what is this guy doing? Well, he's doing no different to Jimmy Savile. He's procuring children for these broken people. Whether they've come from inherited wealth, they come from title backgrounds, or they're self-made people. There's going to be a lot of damaged people there. Now, there's a guy called Ronald Bernard, and he's made a name for himself about 10 years ago as the whistleblowing Dutch banker. He was a billionaire banker in the merchant sort of scene. And he talks about doing well in the banking on a low level, and then he's recognised for his ruthlessness because he comes from an abused background, was sexually abused by his father, and a broken man. But you find a lot of these CEOs are very broken people anyway, and there's a nastiness about them, A bit like we were saying with these elite regiments, people that are very broken. I'm not saying they're nasty, I'm not down quite, but you will see a stronger percentage in in these extreme environments than you will in a mild environment. And he ends up, because of his ruthlessness in business, being pushed forward and forward. And he said it starts off with going to parties where there's an orgy, wife swapping. And then from there, young girls are brought in. And he said from there, small children are brought in. And he said, and then from there, it becomes satanic with child sacrifice. So if we look at this little St. James, this island that he's bought, he's got all this property, hasn't he, Jeffrey Epstein? He's got places all around the world. He's got a private jet that flies 150 people at a time. He's got a landing strip. He owns the boats, the helicopters and the jet that goes to that island. So he's got total control and autonomy there. And also, it's quite ritualistic. There's some Egyptian temple there, almost like the Temple of Baal, you know? And the Temple of Baal worship, was what Jesus protested about that the Israelites were doing. They were sacrificing their children to these gods, you know, Moloch and things like that. And very similar things were seen on that island, very occultic, ritualistic abuse. There was also a maze there, and if anyone who's researched into the occult, that tends to go alongside with a labyrinth, will go alongside with ritual abuse, and that there was a labyrinth there. And maze. So he catered for people at all level. I would say the heart of it, and again, I don't know, never been there, nothing's been contrary to it, but it's not just teenage girls. Why are they giving us up Virginia Dufresne as the 16-year-old? No. There's references of 14-year-old. No. There's no references whatsoever of anyone under 10, although some of the victims have inferred that. And there's nothing to do with boys, and there would have been. I'm telling you now, there'll be boys, there'll be primary school age children there, and I'm almost certain there'll be a ritualistic connotation to this as well. And that is what they don't want getting out. Like I said to you earlier, there's certain things we can accept. And we can accept, right, that these men had affairs with 16-year-old girls, or they call it sleeping. We weren't. She was shagging 16-year-old girl. We might not agree with it, but we can accept it because our law says that that's allowed. But it's wrong, and it's a low-hanging fruit, and that's all they're giving us, a low-hanging fruit. And the fact is, once you pick that scab, you're going to see something very, very dark and very, very sinister, right? But they have to control the narrative, and this is what you're seeing now, controlling the narrative. Jeffrey Epstein had gone past his sell-by date. He's gone. He's finished, right? She won't die. She won't be killed. Ghislaine Maxwell. She's too connected, too powerful, too high up. I think the Israeli government will protect her all the way. She'll be a dual passport holder. She'll have Israeli status. Probably Epstein did as well, but he was going to go, and there's many others that will go. I think his partner, is it Jean-Luc Bernard or whatever his name was, the guy ended up in prison in Paris. He ended up hanging himself as well. But
do you buy that, John? The suicide?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And let me move this on a bit. Let's make it homegrown. So what we got with Jeffrey Epstein, we had a version in the UK. We had a Poundland version of it, right? A bargain basement version of it, right? Of Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell. We had Fred and Rose West. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. Fred and Rose West, they were procuring children. There's so many deaths around them people. Fred was alleged to be involved in what's called the Barn Club. When you look at ritualistic abuse, barns are a big venue. There were bodies found hanging in various barns that he had jurisdiction over, because he used to do this circuit of farm labouring. There was people found hanging in these barns. There was corpses found that had ritualistic connotation, where the heads would be taped up, fingers would be missing, hands would be cut off. So he had a dirty video club, which it was alleged that there was local senior police officers were involved in it. Definitely a swinging scene going on there, and local detectives were going up to his bar in his house called the Voodoo Bar and shagging his horrible Mrs. Rose. So he got them all in on it. The only reason he ever came to notice was the child protection officer, she knew something weren't right, and there was paedophilic activity going on around him and his missus. So she went and got a warrant. Now, a warrant needs to be signed by an inspector, right? They wouldn't sign the warrant. So she forged a signature and got the power to enter and search, and that's when they found the bodies. Had she not done that incredibly bold move, which good on her for doing it, does that make it dishonest? No, it don't. No, because you know the ends justify the means on that one. 950 videotapes were seized, all purported and believed to be homemade pornos. Right? Not one was ever cited in evidence. Not one. They all went missing. So we see the same. They're procurer of children. The children is a currency, and it isn't about the 16-year-old massaging Prince Andrew's foot. No. This goes deeper, and this is, I would say, that island is a hive like Jersey, like Haute de la Garenne, the kids' home in Jersey. There's a senior police officer, probably one of two police officers that I highly respect as whistleblowers. One's called Mike Veal. He spoke out about Ted Heath. And the other one's called Lenny Harper, and he spoke out about the island of Jersey. And he went out from Strathclyde Police out to Jersey on a secondment to look into claims that children went missing in this kids' home. The Channel Islands are very, very bizarre places. They still have a feudal system going where the landed gentry have autonomy over everything. And the children of the heirs and the peers and the lords and ladies of Jersey, they're born with the right to police the people without any training. So they become the honourable police force of Jersey. No training, nothing. They're given a uniform. They're just sent out, and they're allowed to do it. Nowhere in the world would you have that. They even had one guy. He'd been in prison for rape, because he was the son of a lord. He was still a serving police officer. Jersey, this is the UK, And this kid's home, there were rumours that children were murdered there. They were taken from the mainland, from kids' homes over here, out to an island. Well, where are you going to go? Who's going to hear your screams on an island? No way, right? They were taken into the basement of this place, and they weren't just raped. They were ritually abused and murdered and tortured in sadistic sex games. Right? That was the claims. The basement where it all went on, the survivors, those who did survive and some escaped, said you'll find blood up the walls. It was always covered in blood. There's some handcuffs above a bath, and there was weird rituals went on, and kids were murdered in this bath. And what happened is the sewer pipe had been diverted and sent into the basement, and it had been flooded with sewage. So it's full up with shite piss and everything else. So Lenny Harper took in a team, a bit like Time Team. He had archaeologists and anthropologists, and bit by bit, spoon by spoon, they excavated that place. They took along the best cadaver dog in the world, right? And the dog indicated human remains. The archaeologists found them, and the anthropologists identified them, said these are infant remains, probably of a child aged 4 to 5 or something like that, right? Bagged them up, loads of bits of skull, everything. As they went deeper down, they found blood. The dog indicated blood, human blood on a wall. As described, they found the handcuffs, they found the bath with blood. All them years of poo and piss in there, they found it, right? They had it. And if you look at the old Sky News footage, Lenny Harper, he's there, he's a man on a mission, and he's given it to him. We've uncovered it. But there was rumours that the good and the great of Jersey and many others were flown in for these parties. Exactly the same as this island, exactly in so many ways. But Trump's controlling the narrative, you see. He's just saying, oh, it's my friend who just likes young girls. And it's bullshit. They don't give you that wealth. Anyway, Lenny Harper sent the bone off to get forensic verification at the police lab. The bag was sent off. It was interfered with. It was diverted to a different laboratory, not used before by the police. And the report that come back was it was coconut shell. Lenny Lenny Harper was then threatened with arrest. They threatened to take his granddaughter into care, thrown off the island. Well, where have we heard that before? Where have we heard it before? You know, and Trump now is lying. He's lying to his own people. This will bring down the Trump administration. This could bring down financial powerhouses. This could bring down the British royal family. Well, good, in my opinion. Good, they need it. But the damage this could do if it's not stopped here and now, you know, and anyone who pokes their nose in, they could say, oh, we're going to have an FBI inquiry into this. Where will it go? It'll go nowhere. It's the same as our ICSA inquiry. It'll go nowhere. You've got to look at the benefit. Who benefits? Who benefits? Jeffrey Epstein benefited in the sum of billions. Ghislaine Maxwell the same in sum of billions, right? You know, Prince Andrew lied to a nation. Blatantly sat there and lied to a nation.
It's one of the worst interviews I think I've ever watched.
It's cringeworthy. It's insulting. He's just lying, you know, and he's just denying it. And then he's saying, oh, I'm convinced it wasn't me. Even his language, I'm convinced. Yeah, you have convinced yourself it weren't you, but it effing well was you.
The talks of the photo being photoshopped and tampered with as well.
Well, he said it could be. It's a photo of a photo of a photo, you know, and he's just lying. And then he's making this nonsense up about being in a Pizza Express and that he doesn't sweat and he's never been in Tramp's nightclub and he's never, you know, never bought a drink in his life. I
forgot about the sweat comments.
He's lying. But what happened? COVID come along, it went away. Let's not see if something happens, you know, on a national or even an international level, that's maybe a war will occur. Well, they bombed this morning, the Russians have bombed Kiev. Maybe that will escalate, you know. We've now got our Prime Minister saying 16-year-olds can vote. Well, the only reason he's saying that is if you can vote, you can be conscribed. That's the only reason they're doing it. And then where's the focus gone? It's gone away from something. It is sexual abuse of children and the ritualistic murder of children, the sacrifice of children. If we take it to this crazy conspiracy John Wedger level, that is the fuel that runs this demonic global machine. You don't look any further. It's what it is, you know. And look, St. Paul in his letters to the Ephesians, he told us, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against wickedness and principalities in high office. He's telling us the wickedness in high office because this is what these people want. What can they buy you with? The thing is with me, they couldn't buy me with anything. I got offered a bribe by the Turkish mafia because I caused a lot of problems for them. I was very successful. I don't like blowing me on trumpet and all that stuff, but I was just very successful. And there was a lot of jealousy came my way because I was getting a lot of people to talk and a lot of heroin was being seized, right? Huge amounts, right? And so there was rumours coming out from an undercover officer that they was going to get me shot. So £40,000 was put up to have me shot in the head. And a guy, he agreed. He said, I'll do it. I'll take this job on. But before that went on, they thought, one last try, we'll try and bribe him. So I was invited to a meeting by a solicitor to discuss bail terms for a guy I had on bail. And I ended up going to a police station in central London to meet with this guy that's on bail, Turkish gangster, and his solicitor, who was an ex-copper. And during the meeting, the solicitor gets up and walks out and says, oh, I'm going for a cigarette. And I went, oh, I'll come with you. And he went, no, stay with my colleague. And he's happy for me to stay with his colleague. And no, he's on bail and I shouldn't be meeting this guy. It's a no-no, right? But I said, are you all right with that? I'm thinking maybe he's come to give me some info. That I can deal with. And I thought, okay, he's going to talk, right? Nice one. And my sister went, yeah. And then next thing, the guy gets out £4,000 and gives it to me. £4,000, counts it out. That's for you. And I was poor, very, very poor, bringing up kids on my own, and I was in trouble financially. And he went, it will help you and your children. I went, I fucking don't want that. He went, no, tomorrow I'll give you the rest. By the end of tomorrow, you'll have 80,000, because that's what they were making in one day, 80,000 pounds a day. That was he said, but you got to fuck off now, John. And I wouldn't take it. So the death threat went forwards, and, that became a very real thing, very real. But but there was nothing they had I wanted, and I wasn't going to be. Had I taken that bribe, my narrative would be so different. I needed that money, even the £4,000, thinking, "Well, I'll go on holiday, do this," but I didn't want it. It was weird. I don't care for cars. The casinos, I did a lot of work for them. I investigate a lot of crime for the casinos. I saved them millions and millions, and they used to reward me with dinners. And I'll get taken to the Ritz, places like Crockford's Casino and all these nice ones in Berkeley Square and all these big posh places, for dinner. And the meal could be up to £2,000 for a meal. And I didn't fucking want it. In the end, I stopped going. I didn't want it. There was nothing they had I wanted. They just couldn't do it to me, And the same when you was in Vice, you would get some of the prostitutes would offer you gratuities. They would offer it to you. That's where people do falter. And like, no matter who you are, there's something there for you. There was, we used to raid brothels, right? I'm going to give you an example of how it works. So, you go into a brothel looking for children, right? So I would go in as a punter. I'd ring them up and ask them what girls they got. And they used to have them in the newspapers. They used to advertise sauna. It's always sauna, massage and sauna. And if they had an 18-year-old, there's a good chance it'd be 16, So I say, who we got? I know we got stupid names. We've got Jenny, she's 18, she does all their tit size and her waist size and all that, And then we've got so-and-so and their name on. Oh yeah, can I have so-and-so? I'll be in an hour. So you make an appointment, go down there. And as you go through the door, there'll be the madam there. And you'd have to pay like a house fee, 10 or 20 quid, whatever. And go out and give them the money. So go give them the money. I'd put my foot in the door and all the boys would steam in, and then we'd just smash our way through the building, detaining everyone and looking for the kids. So by the time we all got in, they pretty much couldn't run out. We'd have it all contained. So that's how we could do 3 of them a day, hitting them. And then one day they said, right, we're going to a place called Earl's Court, which is